Okay, so welcome everyone to your webinar. If you can hear me and can see me clearly, you can just raise your hand or say hello so we can make sure everyone is seeing us clearly. I'm super happy. I know there are people from Malaysia. Hello, Annie. People from Dubai. And I'm very jealous from our guest, Christian, because he's in Lebanon, because I miss home. Welcome, Christian, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. You're right. I'm delighted to be joining this conversation, and I'm very fortunate that I've spent all of October in Lebanon with visiting family and also just enjoying the natural beauty of the place.
Excellent. So first of all, I would like to share with the attendees, I know many of them, they know you very well. We have some students from Heriotwat, we have Lucy as well, but just for the benefit of everyone, I would like to introduce you, and I'm very honored to welcome you, Professor Christian. I know you don't like to be called professor, but you are a professor. You are a professor of coaching and positive psychology at the University of East London, where I studied and I learned from you personally. And as well, you are an executive director of Growth Coaching International, which is a global coaching training consultancy and coaching provider for the education sector. And coaching and education, I learned about it from you in person. You are honorary fellow at the Center of Positive Psychology of the Melbourne Graduate School of Education at the University of Melbourne, Australia, and visiting professor at the University of Bergamo in Italy. You are recognized as a thought leader in the field of coaching and education, and you have published numerous articles, books, chapters, and books on the topic. And I have all the books that I have here to share with the participants because I keep referring to all your books all the time. And I learned a lot, not only theory, but I learned a lot of practical tips in coaching that I continuously share, I continuously practice and refer back to in my practices as coach. Welcome to all the attendees. I know we have few coaches with us. We have as well a few students who are coaches under training. And we have as well some people who would like to become coaches. We have a couple of people who want as well to undergo some coaching for their own benefits. So, and I know some people who are in the field of organizational psychology, maybe they want to learn more how coaching can benefit them, etc. So this is the topic of today, coaching, a life skill or a profession. So we're going to be discussing specifically this topic in particular. To start with, the first time I ever heard the word coaching was in 2004 when I was working for Emirates Airlines back then, and I was doing my supervisory training. So they asked us all as part of our supervisory training to go and attend coaching skills training. So this is the first time for me I learned about it, and then it evolved with me. I did my NLP, I was not convinced, I went all the way and I did my coaching psychology. But the question that I would like to start with today, Professor, why everyone wants to be a coach those days? Is it a profitable business? What is it?
That's great. That's a great question, Maya, and thank you for asking it. But before I get into that, just to say that, you know, I am an academic. I teach at a university, and I'm passionate about helping people to develop coaching skills. And what's most rewarding, Maya, is when people take these skills and go and flourish like you have, share these skills with others. So really grateful to you, Maya, and other graduates of the master's programs who go on to do amazing things. I'm going to be honest in this webinar. Thank you very much for the attendees. I believe at the moment there's probably more, everybody wants to be a coach, you're right, and there's probably more demand for coach training than there is for executive coaching. And that's something that we have to be aware of within the industry. So, you know, for all of those training to be coaches, I would say it's very important to identify a niche in order to be successful. So to put it simply, the idea that you can get a qualification and then say, you know what, now I'm an executive coach, I'm ready, for your business. That might have been true, like you said, back in 2004. At those times, it was still pretty new. But nowadays, I think it's really important for people to know exactly what's the niche they're going for, or to include coaching as part of their portfolio. Why does everybody want to be a coach? Well, I hope everybody wants to be a coach because I think coaching skills are transferable. So I hope that's why people want to be coaches. I hope people want to be coaches because they're interested in supporting other people, that they're interested in how can we unlock the potential of others. So I hope those are some of the reasons that people want to become coaches.
Excellent. But the next question comes into place here. Can everyone be a coach?
Yeah, that's
wanting is something and being able is something else.
Well, that's a thing, Maya, I think wanting to be a coach, if it's for the reasons that I mentioned, if it's because you think, you know what, I want to have additional communication skills, I want to be able to, support others to grow. If that's why you want to be a coach, I think that's a big part of being successful as a coach. If there's other motives to want to become a coach, then I do have a big question in my mind, whether everybody can be a coach. You know, Maya, already that I believe there's 3 elements to be an effective coach needed. And the first element is a set of skills. And when we do coach training programs, I would say all of the coach training programs would teach you those skills. If the question is, can people learn those skills? Yes, of course. The skills are listening, asking questions, summarizing, paraphrasing, noticing. Most human beings have that ability. The other thing we learn on coach training programs, second element, is a conversational framework. And the most popular is the GROW model, developed by Sir John Whitmore. It's a very effective model. And there's other models out there. So can anybody learn a process, a conversational framework or a process? Yes, of course we can. And that's something that probably takes an hour. In an hour, we can learn a conversational framework. The big question, Maya, you asked, and I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to this question, is can everybody learn a way of being, a coaching way of being? And it's a question I've been asking as long as I've been teaching. I'm an optimist. I am very positive about human beings. So in my heart, I'd like to believe anybody can learn the way of being. And what I've learned over the years is if you, with good intention, you try to use the skills and the conversational framework to support other people to grow and develop, then I think naturally you're going to learn about what's the best way I can be as a human being to support other people to grow and develop. So to answer your question, I don't think you can teach it. I don't believe it's possible just to teach somebody a way of being. I think if somebody has the right intention and they're prepared to practice and they're prepared to learn, then I think everybody has the potential of developing that way of being.
That's a very interesting conversation. And I think it requires a separate webinar by itself. But I want to mention something that when the latest challenges started, I started working on developing a small booklet that is a personal coaching, like self-coaching kind of a questionnaire and a manual. And in the process, I said to myself, I'm going to apply it on myself and I'm going to coach myself on how to get back in shape. I'm not an athlete. I hate the gym. You cannot imagine how much I hate going to the gym. So I've started practicing some of the frameworks and some of the techniques and tools that I do with my clients on myself to try to see if I can actually coach myself to get back to being in shape. And it worked. And throughout the process, I started looking at the different techniques that I could apply to put myself back in shape. And once again, I'm not an expert in losing weight, but I lost 7 kilos. I developed muscles. I'm more comfortable with myself, with my clothes, etc. Because I try to apply a way of being, telling myself that I cannot coach others, I cannot coach myself. So I tried these techniques, and I don't know, what is your take about, personal coaching and self-coaching? Do you do that?
Yeah, another great question. You're asking me challenging questions where I don't have a simple answer, but I do want to think about this with you and with the listeners of this. So there's a huge question in there about, does the coach have to be a role model in any way? And when I started in this career, I used to think the answer was very clear: no, you don't have to be a role model to coach someone, So I could coach a leader in an organization. I don't have to be the best leader in the world. I could coach somebody who, works in education. I don't have to be the best educator in the world. But, I've changed my mind a little bit about this. I do think that there are things we can role model, not necessarily expertise in the subject, but maybe maybe it's the way of being part that we can role model. The idea of being open to learning, the idea of setting ourselves challenges, the idea of us having goals. They don't have to be identical to the client's goals, of course, but I do think we have to role model a mindset of growth and development and aspiration. So that's the bit that I think we have to role model. Now, I'm going to be a little bit controversial about the other part of this question. I don't like the term self-coaching as a term. I do think that's what we're aiming for. So if I meet my client, what I'm hoping for after 4 or 6 sessions, I'm hoping that they will take the tools they've learned and apply it to themselves. So exactly what you did. And by the way, it sounds like you've been very successful. You look very healthy. And
thank you.
Obviously it works. So we can't argue that it doesn't work. I think what I'm arguing is, what is it? Is what you did for yourself, is that called self-coaching? And the reason I resist it, Maya, to be honest with you, is, for me, coaching is about the relationship, right? So it's almost like we're saying self-chess or self-tennis. For me, coaching is powerful because it's a trusting relationship between two people. I think what's powerful about coaching is that you're talking about something important in the presence of somebody else who's not judging you, who's listening actively to you, who's creating the time to think. So for that reason, I don't think there's self-coaching. And at the same time, a lot of the tools and techniques we learn through coaching can be applied to ourselves. So the best feedback I get from my clients who I've coached is they say, Christian, even after the coaching finished, they say things like, they would imagine, what questions might Christian have asked me? What did I learn from that? So in a sense, we are trying to, we're definitely, as coaches, trying to develop the ability for people to continue learning and growing after the coaching finishes. I guess the only thing I'm arguing about is, what's the word for that? Is it continued self-development? Is it applying the tools of coaching for personal growth? I think those things are possible. I just think it's about terminology.
Yeah, I would love to refer, now talking about relationship and calling it something else. I know probably you're familiar about Boyatzie's self-development theory and the framework he uses about, looking at, our actual self, our ideal self, and what are the things we need to do to change. But at the core of this framework, there is the relationship aspect, where you have to have a relationship to hold somebody, to help you, or to help you or to hold you accountable for your actions. Yeah, and there is Ruth here, she asked the question, does duality have to exist to be a coaching outcome?
Let me see, does duality have to exist? I think it's an interesting question, and I don't know the answer to that. I do like the idea of, we could talk about the relationship, having a relationship with ourselves, I guess, in the case of self-coaching. But for me, there is something about growing and learning and developing in the presence of someone else. And for me, that's at the heart of coaching. And, Maya, you shared an example where it worked in your case, but I want to just share a brief example for me where it didn't work in a sense. Because one time, I had a work-related issue that I really wanted to think through. I was up in Scotland. I was going down to London, and in the UK, we can just hop on a train, for example, from Glasgow and get straight down to London. So I took that train. It's an overnight train, so you've got plenty of time. And I thought, like you said, Maya, I thought, look, I'm a coach. This is what I do. I should be able to use the coaching techniques, the process on myself. And I did that. And I think I stayed awake half the night saying, well, what's my goal? Where am I now? I used that for myself. I got to London the next morning and I still hadn't resolved it. I was still tussling with it. I got into my workplace, and I'm very lucky that in my workplace we have coaches because it's University of East London. And I saw my colleague, and as I was walking in, my colleague said, Christian, how are you? And I said, well, I'm really kind of still struggling with something. And he said, oh, just come into my office, we'll have a cup of coffee. And honestly, within 30 minutes, I had the solution because there was somebody else who took that coaching role and just listened to me as I was talking. So maybe there's also something about when I have to articulate, my thoughts to someone else who seems interested and is listening. It's almost like we have to put a logic around it, because in language, we have to present things with some logic. And that's what I found. In my mind, it was possible to have competing ideas, somehow kind of little bit irrational thoughts or illogical. When I had to speak it to someone else, things became clearer for me. So I remain really committed to the idea. And unfortunately, I'm also a bit resistant to the idea of group coaching as well. And I know that's not a popular view at the moment either, but it's for the same reason that I think the power of coaching lies in the relationship between two people, safety that can be created between two people. So I'm very committed to that idea.
I think here, to discuss this a little bit forward and try to come up with the kind of wrapping up this segment, as coaches, we need supervision, right? So part of best practices is to have a supervisor. And this is another thing as well, why a coach cannot all the time be independently coaching themselves. They need as well supervision. And another thing as well from the best practices that I learned, and many of the attendees here learned as well, is the self-reflection that is part of our best practices as coach. So when you are doing some sort of a self-reflection, somehow you're asking, what did I do? How can I do it better? So somehow you are coaching yourself during the self-reflection by asking the right questions. But I agree, you definitely need somebody who can always push you forward. And this is why today I texted actually a PT, a personal trainer, because these are my limitations. Like I could help myself to a certain limit. So now that we spoke about it, it got me thinking that I needed more support. So it was not enough to do it by myself. I needed some more support from an expert person who can bring the best out of me. You know, maybe I want to do more my triceps, or you know what I mean? So I cannot really do it myself. No matter how much I learned, I would still need the expert, which is at the end of the day, the coach who can help you figure out the best way for yourself.
That's excellent. I know you want to move on, but if I may just make one comment about
Yes.
that. I think one of the things that's really powerful, again, about coaching is that by the time somebody comes to coaching, they feel they can benefit from it already. So your example is great. And that's, so if there's people listening to this webinar and thinking what lies behind success of coaching, one of the key elements is choice in the clients. We really need to make sure that clients have choice. So if a client has chosen coaching, for me, we're already 60% of the way there, because they're coming along thinking it's possible to achieve more.
Yeah.
But like you said, Maya, they're doubting their ability, because exactly what you said, if they thought I can do it for myself, then there's no need for a coach. So that's really the success of coaching, is ensuring that the people who are coming to us want to achieve something. They have a hope that it's possible to achieve it, but they also have some doubts about the ability to achieve it on their own. And that's where coaching comes in. And I think coaching can be transformative.
Yes, indeed. And it's true, you know, when we're coaching people, I have a group of people that I'm coaching at the moment with one organization. And one gentleman who's a very senior leader, he was not included in the program. He actually did the scene in his company why he was not included. So he absolutely wanted to be included in the program. So they said, fine, we will put you in the program. And he is the top coachee, the most one benefiting from the group is this guy, because he really wanted to be coached. And the others, they're just tagging along because the company asked them to do it. But he is really, really benefiting. And it's been 8 months I'm working with this group, and he transformed. I swear, this guy was somebody and became somebody else. And he actually, the circumstances worked positively for him, because he works in the health and safety of this big organization. And the current circumstances brought his skills forward. So it was like the whole circumstances and the coaching that really were very beneficial, only because he really wanted as well to be part of this. Yeah, it's amazing. So to go back to if anyone can be a coach, I know so many people want to do their coaching, and I know a lady that I spoke with not so long ago. She started her coaching training, and then she told me, no, Maya, it's not for me. Yeah, how do I know if coaching is for me or not?
I think it's an interesting question. I do think that individuals can identify that for themselves. So it might be to do with levels of discomfort. So I'm thinking about, for example, learning how to drive a car or learning how to ride a motorcycle might be a good analogy. And we often use these analogies with coach training. There's some similarities there because you have to learn the basics. So I would say for people, to decide, I wouldn't make a decision in the middle of coach training. I would probably allow a little bit of time, because many people who come into coach training probably have quite high expectations of what's going to happen. And I had these myself. I used to imagine that when I became a coach, in every conversation, my client's going to say, oh, you've changed my life. Now it's amazing. I'm going to, but not every session is like that. Not every session is like that. So my suggestion would be that it does become apparent whether it is for, so one thing to check is, am I enjoying it? Do I look forward to these sessions? Am I getting something out of it? And I think if you can say yes to those three questions, then coaching is for you. But if somebody really doesn't find it rewarding, doesn't believe that it has a positive impact, then I would say, yeah, it's not for them. But I guess my message is, give yourself some time to practice, because one of the things that holds people back, and I've heard this a lot, is people might say, you know what, Christian, I'm probably more of a mentor than a coach because I like to give advice and I want to, give people solutions. But that's something we've learned We've learned that. So it does take a little bit of time to unlearn that. And it might be that, you know, it's possible that we can add value to people through giving advice. And we can also add value to people by intentionally setting aside our expertise. And, you know, if people are genuinely committed to supporting others, I think it's good to have both choices, so that there will be times when somebody will benefit from maybe some experience I've had. As long as that's contracted and negotiated for, I think that's appropriate. But there will definitely also be times when a person's growth and development will be accelerated because we withhold our expertise.
And this takes us to the difference between coaching and mentoring.
Yeah.
And this comes a lot lately. And does a coach switch to become a mentor? Is a mentor a coach? Is a coach a mentor? What is the difference? So I know this is another long discussion, but how can we briefly sum it up?
Briefly sum it up, yeah, I think there's a couple of considerations here. For me, the most important consideration is what's in the best interest of the person we're supporting, as I kind of suggested. That's one part of it. The other part is to respect the culture of the societies that we're working in. So that's another consideration. But on the first consideration, I know there's lots of different views, and I respect everybody's views on this. And I really believe that whatever people are saying about coaching and mentoring, they're saying it with a good intention. But my view is that it is important to distinguish between the two things. And I believe both are critical. So if I were working in an organizational setting, helping organizations to set up coaching, I would actually advise that they set up both side by side, so that there's a mentoring offering and a coaching offering. And simply by doing that, I think we're improving both, because that means that a client has to think about what is it they want. Do they want expertise? Do they want to know, what did you do 10 years ago that's going to be helpful for me? Yeah. In that case, mentoring is appropriate. If they want to try to develop their own confidence, they want to build their own self-esteem, they want to be innovative, then coaching is appropriate. So what I would say, I don't like the idea that in one coaching conversation, I'll suddenly switch from being a mentor to a coach, because that comes back to the quality of the relationship.
Yeah.
For me, it's very important that both people understand what the relationship is. So I think that should be negotiated. So if at the beginning of the conversation, I say, so what's going to be most helpful to you? And they say, well, I really need advice or guidance, then we can negotiate that this session will be that kind of a conversation. So I think the contracting is really important. So I don't like the idea of, there are people who use the term, for example, coach mentor. If I had a coach mentor, I would be confused. I wouldn't know what am I kind of getting. The other one is more complex. It's to do with being culturally sensitive. It's to do with understanding the context. So if we work in cultures where there's respect for, you know, wisdom and experience and elders, and that's part of the society, we have to respect that as well. And in those societies, again, offering both mentoring and coaching, I think, is one way of doing that. That's to be respectful to the culture.
Was this the reason that led you to explore Irshad? I know one of your very famous book, the framework about coaching in the Islamic culture, is Irshad. Was this one of the things that you really led you to this book?
Yes, exactly. That was one of the things. And I'm actually working on a similar project for in Japan as well. There's a similar project we're working on. And, you know, Maya, it's one of the reasons I like working with you is you're so respectful of other cultures and of people. And for me, ultimately, coaching is a respectful conversation. It's all about respect. And so therefore, yes, I think assuming that a Western model of coaching applies everywhere, in a way it's disrespectful, because a lot of the research, a lot of the design for these have been developed mostly in the United States, maybe also in the UK, and of course other countries in the world, but primarily it's come from a Western perspective. And I think to assume that that is the right approach is disrespectful. So my view globally is we should develop coaching approaches that are respectful of the cultural context, but we should never assume that coaching is the right answer always. And we shouldn't go to other cultures and if they're really into their mentoring to say, no, mentoring is kind of, that's too directive, you should be coaching. I think the most respectful way is to say, we've been researching this idea called coaching. This is how it works in Western culture. It does work. There's evidence to show that it works. But then we bring a curious lens to say, what are the things that we've learned from researching coaching is going to be appropriate in your context? And how can we design something that is appropriate here? But I would always put it alongside other interventions that work. I know I'm talking a lot, Maya. I hope this is okay.
No, please, please. I want more. I know we discussed the topic 2 weeks ago in the International Psychology Conference, and it was not enough 1 hour, and we wanted to discuss more. But, you know, I coached in Malaysia as well a few years back, and I coached in the UAE, and I coach in different parts. I want to say hello again to Annie because I met her in Malaysia as well. And it is true, it's different when you coach in different cultures because people are different. And I personally faced difficulties because I did not have a clear understanding of the culture and how they function, so I can use the right tools or I can use the right approach. So it does you know, make a difference because it's not a one size fits all, you know. Even leadership theories that applies in US cannot apply here. So there is a different kind of intervention, as you said. It's not a one size fits all, and the culture does play a role. That's why it is required to have, you know, different frameworks that are customized, or I don't know what we call it, tailored to the culture.
It is. And so my perspective when working with individuals and organizations is, you know, if the interventions they're already using are working, they should carry on with that. And that's kind of the respectful approach. So I don't think we should ever go to a place and say, you know, stop at what you're doing. Now you need to be doing coaching. I think let's learn what already works in your organization. And then, like you say, a respectful approach to say, these kind of interventions are working here and here, and here's the research. How can it benefit your organization? And so I think this is something I'm quite passionate about. Anything to do with coaching interventions have to be respectful to the principles of coaching. So, you know, I've seen organizations that say, oh, we've got a high potential, you know, group here. They're all going to get coaching, right? Or we've got fast track management, whatever. They're all going to get coaching. That's not a respectful intervention because, so really at the heart of coaching is the principle of respecting people's autonomy. So for me, the best case scenario in organizations is to say, we have available coaching with an explanation of what it is, what it can do. But I would say not just that. Then we say there's also mentoring in our organization. There's also training that you can also go and do your own study. Immediately, we're putting the clients at the center and we're giving them choices. And like the example you gave, Maya, if somebody then says, you know what I want coaching because I understand. Coaching is an intervention which allows me to do the thinking, me to make the choices. The chances of it being successful are multiplied many times as compared to an organization, again, with good intention might say, coaching is so good, we want all of our managers to learn it. Well, if somebody doesn't want to learn to become a coach, something we started this conversation with, I don't think they're going to be a good coach.
Yeah. And now I would like to highlight one thing that it's been a while when somebody asked me about my profile or on my bio, I don't write I'm a coach. It's not because I'm very proud to be a coach and this is my top skills, coaching skills, especially when I went all the way and did coaching psychology, but because I don't only use coaching as intervention. I'm a people development professional. I use training, I use coaching, I use mentoring, I use assessment centers, I use different sort of things to support the people development. So I think this is a tick on the box, like kind of a checklist for me that yes, it is true. And thank you so much for bringing this to the table, because it relates to actually how I thought about, you know, people development, not only coaching as a single profession, because you should be able to present on the table different solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really important to make this point that in events like this, because, you know, as coaches, hopefully we've seen the power of coaching. We've seen it's transformative. So there's a risk that we can become too passionate about it. You know, we can become so committed to it that we think, you know, we must impose this. We must, I prefer exactly what you said. Coaching is a very powerful tool for professional development and professional learning. It's one tool that I think it is important to include along other tools. It's also, for me, a change management tool. At an individual level, I think we can see it again alongside other interventions as something that can be used. I think in order to promote coaching, what we need to get better at is to explain what are the situations in which we think coaching is preferable to other interventions. And that's the thing that I think is our next challenge within the profession of coaching, is to be clear that we're not saying it's right for everyone, because as soon as we do that, we're going to turn people off. There's going to be a lot of people who say, yeah, we tried coaching, it didn't work, or I don't want it. It's just a typical thing, is if you try and sell something too hard, people are going to resist the idea. I think if we're humble about coaching to say, it doesn't work in every situation, but here are the situations where it works. And for me, what are those situations? When we want to build self-confidence, when we want to increase engagement, when we're interested in supporting people to grow and develop in a way that supports their well-being, if it's about developing self-esteem. These are scenarios where I would say, you know, out of all of the different interventions, probably I would use coaching if that's what you're trying to do. If you want, again, organizations want different things. If organizations, I'm going to be a little bit challenging now, but if organizations want today the managers they had 10 years ago, then I would say use mentoring only. If you want, and not every organization wants this, if you want new leadership, if you want innovative ideas, use coaching. Now, there's a health risk to coaching as well, because one of the consequences of providing coaching is people are going to ask more questions. They're going to take more risks. They're going to be a little bit more challenging. So again, if you're in an organization where that's not what you want, it's important to be aware of the consequences of providing coaching across an organizational setting.
That's a very interesting point. I'm working with another client. I like to refer to practical examples, of course, by keeping the confidentiality. I'm helping them on developing one of the competencies with their team, which is steering growth. So they want to steer growth in the organization. Therefore, they want to develop their people. They want to grow others. They want to, you know, so this group of leaders require to learn how to grow others. And I cannot think better, and I cannot think about anything better than coaching skills that is going to help them grow others. So does all leaders in our day require coaching as a skill?
I don't know how to answer that next question, but the first part of it, I agree with entirely, and it's a great practical example of saying, in this scenario, this is what you need. And that's a perfect example. Rather than imposing coaching skills on managers. So that's why I'm a little bit hesitant about the other point. We can't impose it on people, but exactly as you said, if the question is, so this is something I've used in other presentations that helps us to think about this. This is, if coaching is the answer, what is the question? You know what I mean? So depending on the question, coaching is the right answer, but I think too much, I think the opposite example is an organization that says, oh, coaching looks really popular, they're doing it, that other organizations are, we're going to do it. And so if we're working with organizations, our first question should be, what is it you're hoping to get as an outcome, either of training your leaders to be coaches or providing coaching to your leaders or to your staff? I think helping them to say, what are we doing it for? Just to make sure that it's the right outcome they're getting. If they say, we want everybody to implement this particular technique or strategy, I would say, well, that's not coaching. Don't use coaching for that. There's other interventions to make sure. So I worked with an organization as well, where what they were talking about is this idea of fidelity. Fidelity is to do something consistently all the time. And they were saying, we want to coach them to do that. And I was saying, I wouldn't use coaching to deliver that outcome.
I see. We spoke at the beginning about that some of the coaching skills that are transferable into day-to-day life. So if a manager or a leader or, you know, maybe in different disciplines of people development have done some coaching training, what kind of skills they can benefit from to transfer them into their day-to-day life?
Well, it's hugely transferable, as you know, Maya, and I've experienced this myself. I think I've become better at a few things as a result of coaching, but this comes back to my earlier point. We can't force managers to learn to become coaches so that we get these benefits. If managers want to learn to become coaches, then we have the benefits, because this is really about what's transferable for me is mostly the way of being. Right? I think the way of being is what's most transferable. So I do a lot of my work in the education sector, as you mentioned, and there's actually research to show that if you train a school leader in coaching skills, they become a better leader. And if you train a teacher to become a coach, they become a better teacher. Why is that? Well, one of the things we learn as coaches is how to listen. So one thing that would be powerful is being able to listen first. That's a practical example. We're better at asking questions, so intentional about the kind of questions we ask. We're better, once we're trained to be coaches, to focus on a positive future. We're better at helping people to break things down into small steps. So there's some practical things we get better at, but maybe even more importantly, I think we're less judgmental, Maya. I grew up in Lebanon, as you know, and it was during a time of civil war, so it was a challenging time. I have to be honest to say, I probably learned not to trust people. I learned to be judgmental during that time. There was conflict all the time. And one of the things that taught me how not to do that stuff was learning to become a coach, because every time you're coaching, first of all, I realized you can trust people. They're trustworthy. Everybody's got a positive intention. I learned that. I also learned to be less judgmental, but it takes time. You can't simply tell somebody, oh, you shouldn't be judgmental. Well, if somebody tells, that means nothing to me. Yeah. But you have to learn to be less judgmental. And I learned it because I thought the less judgmental I am, the more comfortable my client is. So coming back to that question of, this is what I said, if you're learning to become a coach with a genuine intention, then it's natural that we develop that question of, how do I need to be in order for people around me to grow and flourish? And one of the ways I need to be is less judgmental. Don't judge, don't assume, don't put stereotypes, don't limit somebody's potential. And this is, again, it's a little bit controversial view of mine. A lot of people push back when I say this, but I've genuinely grown to believe that people have unlimited potential. And that's a non-judgmental way of saying, I don't think on talking to this manager, their maximum is they can get to this level in the organization. Or I don't coach a student and I think, you know, they can never be that. They can only reach this level. I've grown to believe that people have unlimited potential. That's through coaching.
Yeah, and personally, I cannot think, I can think about many examples. I mean, I'm a stepmother for 2 children, and I think coaching training have helped me become a better stepmother, a better wife. Now my husband, he knows. He asks, "Are you coaching me?" He's away. It's been a while, so he's stuck in Saudi for the moment. I think in every webinar I mentioned this.
All right.
Anyways, I think what you just said takes us back to the point of a way of being. Yeah. So once you stop being judgmental, once you start allowing others, you know, to bring their potential out, this is when you realize as a coach that it has become a way of being for you, not only with your coachee, but maybe with the people around you in your day-to-day life, right?
That's absolutely right. And for those of the listeners who are training to become coaches or people are already coaching, the first step around this is, you know, we have to be kind and compassionate to ourselves. Yeah. You know, it's normal to judge. This is how we learn things. This is how we've grown up. So the first stages of becoming less judgmental, because it's a lifelong journey, and I've got a long journey to go ahead of me as well. But some of the first steps are to notice when we're being judgmental, and it still happens to me. I still notice. So I'll give you a real example. Coaching conversation in the last 2 months or so, I thought, you know, maybe this person just isn't motivated enough to achieve their goal. That's already a judgment. You know, yeah. That judgment gets in the way of my ability to support this other person. I believe that as human beings, we're being judged all the time. So anytime we're outside, there's judgment going on, and that's normal. That's part of my dream is that coaching is the one place where we're not judged. Yeah. And that requires the coach to continually try to develop that ability to be non-judgmental. Because as human beings, if we're judged, we shut down. You know, we're not going to be as creative. We're not going to be open. The moment somebody judges me, I'm not going to be vulnerable. I'm going to defend myself. I'm going to protect myself. And, you know, coaching is that opportunity where if we can create the right environment, the safety that's needed, then I can be vulnerable in that moment. And that's, I think, what's powerful about coaching. And you're right, it does impact on our personal relationships. I think my wife's quite happy that I trained to be a coach, and probably my son is as well. But not just that, maybe professional relationships I have. One thing I've noticed that's different about me is I give people the benefit of the doubt for longer. You know, I don't immediately assume this person's trying to do this or that person. And that allows a relationship to grow, I think.
I want to leave some time for the questions. I know Ruth has a couple of interesting questions, but before I would like to wrap up about, you know, coaching as a skill or as, you know, a profession. In one of your books, if you recall, I'm sure you recall, you wrote that, you speak about, in the Coaching Skills, the Practical Guide, you speak about putting a hat of a coach. Mm. So people switching to a coach role. And as leaders, do they need to switch to a coach role and put a hat of a coach, or it should be built in of their daily, day-to-day practices and once again to their way of being as leaders?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, I used to use this language, and I know other people do, so I'm not judging other people.
Okay.
But I'm just sharing my own view. I think the idea of putting the coach hat on and off, I think that's appropriate in the early stages of your development as a coach. But I think especially with leaders, etc., for me, the coaching way of being isn't something that you can just put on and off. You know, when we develop that coaching way of being, it should permeate into all aspects of our life. So that's the only caution I have with the idea of saying, I'm going to put my coaching hat on now, because it's more than a hat. It's really actually who you are. And that's the benefits I think we can get. So again, I work in schools. My dream in schools is every educator has that kind of coaching way of being. And what do I mean by that? Well, that the teacher believes in people, believes that everybody has potential, sees what's good in people, is curious, is learning, is developing. So you can see what I mean. That way of being is even more important than coaching. And hopefully everybody who's listening to this can think back to that educator that has that positive impact on them. And I can think of a few. I'm very lucky. And, you know, I really don't remember what they taught me in terms of curriculum. I'm sorry to say this. I've probably forgotten a lot of the history I learned or whatever. But for some of them, what stayed with me is that belief they had in me, or the way they had high expectations of me, those kinds of things. So this is why I resist a little bit the idea of the teacher puts a coaching hat on for a minute or two. I would prefer it's part of how she interacts with people around her, how she talks to her colleagues, how she interacts with her parents and carers. That's what we're talking about. And in that case, it's not about coaching at all. It's more about that coaching way of being.
That's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful way of wrapping it up. And for the benefit of the audience, this is, I don't know if you have a newer version of this one, but this is the one I have related to coaching in education. I was pregnant when I was doing this module, and I had to drop out because we were only 3. So one day I'm going to continue. But I still read the book.
Just for everybody, that book is a little bit out of date now. I do think it should have a second edition. There's a book that I co-wrote with John Campbell called School Leaders Guide to Coaching in Schools, the Leader's Guide to Coaching in Schools, which is a more up-to-date version than that. And one day, Maya, I'm going to write a book that's called Coaching as Education. That's my next passion, is take that coaching approach to education in general, which is all about putting the learner at the center, believing in their ability to grow, creating the environment in which they can grow. Because what I said about knowledge before, nowadays we have Google. You know, a lot of the knowledge we need is out there. I just love this idea of creating environments where we develop learners who are passionate about learning, who have the skills they need to learn whatever it is they need, who are aware of their emotions, who are thinking about how do they relate with one another. So if I'm fortunate, in the next 10 years or so, there'll be a book called Coaching as Education.
I will be looking forward for this book for sure. We have a couple of questions from Ruth, and please, for the rest, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to send them across. Ruth, she asked, when we view coaching through the lens of diversity and inclusion, do we have space for spirituality, religious expression, and its impact on the coaching outcome?
Wow, what a great question. I think one of the shortcomings of coaching psychology is that we haven't addressed sufficiently spirituality. It's not discussed a lot. Religion isn't spoken about a lot, and that's not appropriate, because with spirituality and with religion, there's so much wisdom there. I don't understand why we don't make more use of that wisdom.
Yeah.
No. Just as a short answer to that question, I think one of the aspects of what I mentioned before about respect is we should respect the worldview of our client. And the client should say, this is the worldview that I have. And they have every right to say, this is my worldview and I want to be coached within that worldview. So I think it is appropriate that we take into account religious perspectives and teachings and traditions, if that's what the client chooses. And this is a very difficult thing we're talking about here. So one thing for coaches to check with themselves is, this comes back to being non-judgmental. Do they have the capability of being fully respectful of the worldview of the client that they're working with? And if they don't, they really shouldn't be coaching that person. And that's a very strong view I have, because if I'm coaching somebody and I don't, or I disagree with their worldview, or I don't respect that worldview, then I can't build a trusting relationship. And I really believe I'm not the right person, therefore, to be coaching them. So it's something that is important for us, particularly in this region, for us to be respectful of these questions. And again, I come back, if the coach is not able to do that, then they shouldn't do the coaching.
Excellent. Zayed asked, I think this is a fundamental question related to the basic and fundamental of coaching. How to coach someone who believes they don't deserve the goal they've set themselves to achieve?
Wow. Well, that's a perfect conversation. That's another example of where coaching is the right approach, because I think we can bring that to awareness. And the coaching process can address that issue. And this is another big topic that Zayed has raised, which I think is very valuable, that for me, coaching has multiple benefits. One is, but it's not limited to this. This is probably the least important. One is it helps people to set goals and work towards those goals. That's one part. I think there's so many additional benefits. And one of those is raising awareness about things that may be holding us back. And that kind of belief of, I probably don't deserve this goal, or those kind of self-limiting beliefs might be holding us back. So I find that coaching is able to help somebody to achieve goals, but I think the side benefits are it helps people to understand themselves better and learn about themselves. And just to come back to the specific question, the very process of setting a long-term goal, an aspiration, and then breaking it into small steps will start to challenge that view. And the coach can challenge the view. What makes you think you don't deserve that, or you're not able to do that? And that's incredibly powerful. I coached somebody into a school leadership position who's, the first thing she said to me is, I don't think I can ever be a head teacher, and I don't deserve it. I'm not a leader. I don't have any leadership skills. And the most empowering thing about those conversations is to see her view change. But it changed because we took small steps. And as she got closer, her confidence grew, her self-esteem grew, and then it seemed possible. And sorry, I'm talking a lot again, but there was a project that's being done in India with young girls in India who didn't believe that they could even have dreams, right? So the idea of having a dream was kind of alien, but the process of coaching allowed them to think, oh, actually, yeah, I can set objectives and I can work towards them. So again, just a great example of how coaching can be very powerful.
I'll take two more questions. Thank you, Ruth, for sharing the link to the book, The Leader's Guide to Coaching in Education. See, you have big fans here, Professor. And I know Ruth, as well as Nada, they are eternal learners, and I've been somehow, appreciating and observing their amazing development journey as coaches. One question from Karthik. This is another trend. So coaching is a trend and motivational speaker is another trend. So Karthik is asking a question about both. Is it easy to make the transition from being a coach to a motivational speaker? Also, do you think both are interrelated in similar or somehow?
I don't think they're interrelated. I think they're different things. I think we have to be cautious with motivational speakers, because it depends what they're basing it on. So sometimes if we get somebody who's won a gold medal or who has climbed a mountain or something like that, it's possible for people watching this to think, well, I can't do that thing, that particular thing. And sometimes motivational speakers will motivate one group of an audience and not others. So I think I love the idea that each of us can inspire people around us simply by the way that we interact. And every society, you know, I've had the great privilege to work in Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Kuwait and Qatar and Saudi Arabia. You see role models in society, and I think I prefer that, and I prefer helping people to set their own goals. The risk of getting somebody who won 100-meter gold medal, I entirely respect them and I value what they've done, but there will be some people saying, well, I can't ever do that. So it's very important, I think, for everybody to have role models that look like them, that seem like them, that make them think, yeah, I could do that. I can definitely do that. And coaching is a great way. So I would recommend that as a coaching question is, who do you see around you who is a role model that you would, and what might they do? And how did they get to where they got to? So I have that little view about motivation, and I know some motivational speakers are amazing and they motivate people. So I'm just a caution around that.
It's two different things. Mustafa is saying that agile is a trend as well. You know, agile leadership now, there is a lot of talk about agile leadership.
Yeah.
One more question, sorry.
No, great. I think there's a lot of management processes. There's a lot of like systems thinking, agile thinking that are very complementary to coaching. There's some methods where coaching is a really good methodology to use as part of a bigger management processes. But it's just to make sure that they are complementary.
Yes. One last question, and if anyone has more questions, feel free to share them after. You have my details and you can connect and ask the questions at a later stage. But one last question I take, because we are 2 minutes over the time. Zayed is asking, is coaching a developmental process or a continuous improvement process?
Yeah, look, coaching itself is a development process that encourages continuous development. So we have to be careful, again, not to create dependency. I don't like the idea that somebody has a coach for 5 years. Coaching should be time limited, and it is about helping the person to develop tools and strategies to move forward. But ultimately, the coach's role is to make themselves redundant. We don't want anybody to be dependent on us. But like Maya said, like I've been saying, at different points in our life, we do need that extra thinking support, somebody where we can talk openly and honestly. We all need it, and but we mustn't become dependent on that.
Well, Mustafa is continuing to ask about the agile. Can I share an agile mindset with improvement any sector? I think it is possible. It really depends on how you're going to do the change management and the shift.
Yeah, I think with any change management process, I would recommend using a coaching approach when working with a client to say, what is it you want to achieve? And then to propose. You could say, well, there's this management style, there's this leadership approach, there's this. And so I do like the idea of matching a coaching approach to helping people to identify what works, asking them how they're going to measure it, how they're going to implement it afterwards. So I do think they may be complementary.
Thank you so much, Professor. I'm very, very happy that we spent 1 hour discussing on a webinar without talking about COVID. COVID-19.
We do this all the time.
It's been a long time. This is all, you know, resilience, COVID, how to adapt the new normal.
Honestly, you're such a great host that I honestly forgot about COVID just for an hour. And I'm very happy.
Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you so much for all the attendees for the interesting questions. I really appreciate your presence with us, and I hope you enjoyed being with us for an hour, being our guest for an hour. I wish you well, and please everyone stay in touch and see you again soon. Thank you so much, Christian. Continue enjoying Lebanon, and regards to the family.
Thank you very much.
Take care.